I didn't know Rabbi Arthur Waskow well. He died Monday at the age of 92. He was a generational leader, a firebrand for justice and numerous progressive causes, most of which I agreed with wholeheartedly. I also feel like I owe him a debt of gratitude. My life and my rabbinate seem to exist on some level in his wake, as it were. His daughter and his son-in-law helped me start a Chevra Kadisha in Chicago. He got his PhD in Madison from Wisconsin, my alma mater. He was a native Baltimorean who went to Hopkins and worked to desegregate Green Oak Park in 1963. He was an organizer and pioneer in both the Chavurah and renewal movements. He penned the Freedom Seder Haggadah in 1969, offering a liturgical reframe of our Jewish founding narrative, evocative of the liberation theology of the era, and which spurred probably hundreds of thematic and activist Haggadot in the years since. Waskow's passion for progressive issues put him at the forefront of countless fights for greater justice, and not infrequently behind bars. But when I heard of his passing, my mind first went to a 2-volume set that he edited and that I have on my bookshelf. It's called Torah. I don't think I can speak louder than this. Maybe you really can't hear back there? Oh, because of the thing? Yeah. I'll tell you what. Rav Tyler, would you mind grabbing me a microphone from the outside in the back? Thank you so much. Well, I'll keep going, but I'll try to speak as loudly as I can. We haven't really tested how much the sound goes. It works very well in this room, but I understand if it's not working there. What's that? It's the fan. I get it. We could also turn off the conditioned air, but that'd probably be a bad idea. So let's get everybody sweltering in the back of the room, and then see if you can pay attention to the Torah. Yeah. Let me come back quickly. I'll add it. When I heard of Rabbi Waskow's passing, my mind first went to a 2-volume set that he edited and that I have on my bookshelf. It's called Torah of the Earth. And in the first volume, he argues perhaps the most profound Jewish statement about the relationship between human beings and the earth is bound up in 2 words of Hebrew, Adam and Adamah. The first, he says, means human beings. The second means earth. The words are connected to teach us that human beings and the earth are intertwined. Not identical, but intertwined. Thank you. So many problems could be avoided or fixed, he suggests, if we would understand and refer to ourselves as Earthlings. This connection, how are we doing? Can you hear me better now? Perfect. This connection between humanity and the earth was on full display last week in the creation narrative, and it features again this week in Parashat Noach. Last week, Adam is instructed le'ovda u'leshomra, to work and guard the earth. This week, the earth itself has become a battleground filled with Hamas, violent lawlessness, just a coincidence, not etymologically related, and hashchata, destruction. Noticing this, God decides to hit the reset button. Bible scholar Richard Elliott Friedman says this shows, once again, the environmental suffering because of human corruption. But how exactly? The Hebrew in chapter 7, verse 13 reads as follows, V'hineni mashchitam et haaretz, which is sometimes translated following the Rashi, or at least his first interpretation. I am about to destroy them, that is, wipe them from the earth. But the word et can also mean with, as Rashi writes in his Devar Acher, his second opinion. Ibn Ezra says, and behold, I will destroy them and destroy the earth. Leaving aside the question of whether the punishment of humans fits their crimes, it's hard to understand why the entire land-based animal kingdom and all the foliage is also eradicated. Could the Torah be indicating something more elemental? That human behavior is fundamentally tied to the health and welfare of the planet. Hillel Zeitlin, the Hebrew and Yiddish poet who perished in the Shoah, cites the 18th century Maggid of Dubno, who suggests the story is not exactly about God targeting humanity for their corrupt behavior, but humanity destroying themselves and the earth, leaving God with no other choice. When a person makes a banquet, he writes, he seats every guest in his proper place and serves everyone with the finest of foods. Now, imagine if the guests suddenly start snatching food from one another and begin screaming at each other and fighting. If the person making the banquet sees this, he will simply take everything that had been prepared for the company and will tell the people, now you have an empty table before you and have nothing to fight over. That was what God did. He says, when in the days of Noah, the Kadosh Baruch Hu saw the people were stealing from one another, it was as if God said, didn't you have enough good in the world that you wouldn't have to fight one another? And then God, as it were, clears the table. It's not just in Genesis that we find this integral connection between humanity and the plight of the land and all that grows upon it. Deuteronomy 20 instructs warring armies not to attack trees. Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh. It asks, are trees of the field like human beings? But later commentators read this as a statement, for a man is a tree of the field. For example, Rabbeinu Yonah Gerondi, the 13th century commentator on Pirkei Avot, asks what Hillel means in his famous statement, Im lo achshav ematai, if not now, when? So that he not say, I will occupy myself with menial tasks today, and tomorrow I'll worry about improving myself. Rabbeinu Yonah then makes the connection between people and trees. When the sapling is small, a person can grow it to be a straight tree and not to be crooked. However, after it grows crooked, it's very difficult to fix. And so too, when a person is young, it is easy for him to be on a good path and to turn from evil. But when he grows old with his evil, it's difficult in his eyes to leave it, as it is written, since a man is a tree of the field. Carpe diem, he might have said in the Latin. Plant trees, or plant yourself in good soil while you can. Maybe for yourself in this moment, perhaps for future or even generations to come. And that's the thing, we get so focused on the Mabul, the destruction narrative of this week's Parsha, we forget that the purpose of the flood story is maybe less about what caused it than what we, humanity, are meant to do about it. The late Israeli scholar and polymath Yeshayahu Leibovich, he says that the flood is only the first part of this week's parasha. Chalka sheni hu ha'olam she'la'achar ha'mabul. The second part is everything that happens after the flood. In fact, there are 77 psukim, 77 verses about the flood, and then, he points out, 76 psukim after the words Zot ot habrit. This is the sign I set for the covenant between me and you, and every living creature with you, lidorot olam, for all ages to come. The sign, the rainbow, stands at the middle, the very center of the portion, and it's a promise. It's not a threat. It's a permanent truce, an invitation to do better, to be better. Would that we humans were just a little bit more trustworthy. Our poor track record aside, past failure, missed opportunities, these are not an excuse to throw up our hands. As Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better, and then when you know better, do better. The implication of the flood isn't that human behavior toward the environment caused the destruction, though of course we know in this era of climate change that we can indeed destroy the world that way, not just the earth, unfortunately, but also the seas as well. The text, though, I think is concerned with a different question. How might our behavior toward one another change for the better? If we prioritize better interpersonal conduct, might the world eventually benefit? Or, as Art Waskow might have put it, How might we be worthy or become worthy of the earth from which we Earthlings were taken? This past spring, I saw a new banner hanging from the entrance pergola of the Valley View Farms Nursery in Hunt Valley. Who's been out there? Yeah, a number of you. It's a good place to buy flowers and plants. That's where Miriam and I like to go every Mother's Day, which is often her birthday as well, to buy our flowers and plants for our front stoop, for our backyard, and the deck of our row home. And the banner that was out there, it read, "The best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The next best time is now." Well, that sounds Jewish, I thought. Recalling the famous story of Choni HaMa'agel, Choni the circle drawer, who when he asked an old man why he was planting a carob tree, knowing it would not bloom for 70 years, he replied that just as others had planted trees for him to enjoy, he would now do so for his descendants. So I saw this banner, and afterwards I went down an internet rabbit hole trying to locate the origin of the phrase quoted at Valley View Farm. It's included in the Oxford Treasure of Sayings and Quotations, the 4th edition from 2011, with no attribution except modern. The internet, which is always the wisest collective, seems to think that it's an old Chinese proverb. One commentator, though, that I found reports that actual Chinese people say it's from the 2009 some 2009 English language book. The website, Quote Investigator, confirms the origin is not Chinese, but found an anonymous attribution going back to 1967 in the Cleveland Plain Dealer, except the time frame there is 30 years, not 20 years. And there's a different mention from 1968 that says 80 years, much closer to Choni's 70 years. Whatever the origin of the aphorism, it has me thinking about how often we focus on missed opportunities instead of determining right here and now to invest in plant and human futures. Sometimes this is selfishness. Why should I worry about a future generation and the climate that they will face? Other times it's simply inertia. Have you noticed how many businesses and other public venues since the pandemic no longer bother to post recycling bins? But I also think people feel embarrassed by those missed opportunities. We focus on the tragedy of not planting that tree 20 years ago and neglect a possible present leading to better outcomes. Here's a really simple and probably all too common example. Consider someone that you may have seen many times, maybe even spoken with, but don't really know anything about. At some point, you may feel like it's too late to ask basic questions. Where are you from? What's your story? Even what's your name? Recently, I had an encounter that reminded me why I think it's worth planting that tree now and not waiting 20 or 30 or 80 years. There's an older man who often sits, sometimes for quite some time, on the marble retaining wall in front of our garden, which is across the street, steps from the concrete box where I plant flowers from Valley View Farms. He's portly and avuncular with a cherry gray beard and a cane. In the past, we would exchange pleasantries, and I would reassure him he's welcome to sit at my garden for as long as he likes, but otherwise he was a complete stranger. So often hurrying from some home obligation to some work obligation or vice versa, I felt like maybe it was just too late to make a real connection. Recently, though, on a Wednesday evening, I saw him sitting on the retaining wall, but not mine. It was actually a few doors down to the south on my neighbor's retaining wall. I happened to not be in a rush. I decided to walk over and say hello. I asked him how he was doing, and he explained that he moved just a little bit down the street in order to take advantage of my neighbor's tree with its abundant leaves and ample shade. My tree is really pathetic, actually. It's not good. Somebody had planted that tree, though, many years ago in my neighbor's yard. And here was this man enjoying its shade. He asked me what was happening at the synagogue. I said that children had been dropped off for our Jewish Discovery Lab. We chatted about the neighborhood in Baltimore in which he had lived for nearly 85 years since his birth. He explained that he likes to sit and meditate in the fresh air. I asked what he used to do for a living. I've done different things, he said, but more recently I was in the upholstery business. I don't want to brag, but I sold $800,000 worth of upholstery over 10 years when I worked there. I like to talk. I told him my late father was in sales and that he too liked to talk and listen. He agreed that listening is a critical skill for a successful salesman. Before heading into my house, I introduced myself. I'm Daniel. I'm Ernest. Really nice to meet you, Mr. Ernest. Nice to meet you too. Ki ha'adam etz hasadeh. For a man is a tree of the field. Sometimes the benefit of planting a seed takes years or decades to realize, but it need not be the case. You can enjoy witnessing a sapling or a new relationship grow. Over time, with attention and nourishment, both become stronger, the roots deeper, the branches wider. Choni understood this, but he learned the hard way. There's a deep connection between trees and human relationships. At the end of his story, the Talmud relates that he goes to sleep and he wakes up Rip Van Winkle style 70 years later. Yes, the carob tree is fully grown, but all the people he's ever known and loved are gone. He dies, lonely. O chevruta o mituta, fellowship or death, the text concludes. A few days after that Wednesday, I saw the portly man with the cane walking up the sidewalk in front of the shul. Hello, Mr. Ernest, I said. This is my wife, Miriam. Hello, Miriam. Nice to see you, Daniel, he said. A seed becomes a shoot in our little plant nursery here in Reservoir Hill. I'll conclude with this final note. Many years ago, Rabbi Art Wasko, Zichrono Livracha, wrote a provocative and pretty chutzpahdik essay in the first Jewish catalog. It was titled, How to Bring Mashiach. He cited 10 verses or rabbinic texts about the advent of the Messiah and then offered contemporary prescriptions for how folks might apply them in 1973 when he was writing this essay. I surely will not read the whole thing, but you'll not be surprised that he begins with this text from Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai, who wrote, if you're planting a tree and you hear that the Mashiach has come, first finish planting and then run to the gates of the city and tell him shalom. Wasko's application, therefore, plant a tree somewhere as a small tikkun olam, wherever the olam most needs it. He suggests Vietnam, in a defoliated former forest. If you cannot get there, remember this is 1973, he says send money to the Abraham Heschel Memorial Forest Trees and Life for Vietnam Fund. Heschel died in 72. Or perhaps plant a tree in Appalachia, where the strip mines have poisoned the forest. Or Brooklyn, where, quote, the asphalt has buried the forest. Go back there and plant it and live with some of the old Jews who still live there. I wonder, in more recent years, what he thought of Park Slope. If policemen come to save the asphalt, he says, keep planting. Offer everyone a turn with the shovel. That was his first text. The 10th, the final text, is a story from the Berditchever Rebbe. Said a poor tailor, one Yom Kippur, I've committed only minor offenses, but you, O Lord, have committed grievous sins. You have taken babies from their mothers, and mothers from their babies. Let us be quits. May you forgive me, and I will forgive you. Said Reb Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev to the tailor, why did you let him off so easily? Waskow concludes, therefore, do not let God off so easily. Hear his or her voice, but challenge his or her answer. Wrestle mightily, like Yaakov. You may win. Keep wrestling. Keep on wrestling, but also keep on planting would be a good epitaph for Rav Arthur Wasco, I think. It's also a good Jewish motto for us. Now, despite the world's challenges, and also because of them, it's a good time to plant something new. Trees for sure, but perhaps more importantly, words and behavior that help and heal. Our connection to this earth, it runs deep. And small gestures, they matter. Maybe they matter most of all. There's plenty of time to set a table and to share a meal. Shabbat Shalom.